Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. I'm Richard Jacobs, Executive Director of the nonprofit Finding Genius Foundation and host of the Finding Genius Podcast. In late 2016, I was rear-ended at 65 miles an hour by a truck on the highway, which sent me off-road into a ditch. The impact of the collision gave me a concussion and other injuries. At the hospital, a CT scan showed that I had thyroid nodules, which turned out to be cancer. It was then, when I had a biopsy of my neck, that I realized even if I was a millionaire, I wouldn't want a second or a third biopsy due to the pain and the invasiveness of it. And appointments at that time for thyroid experts were 3 to 6 months out. And I was worried about dying now, even if that was irrational. So because of this, I've decided to raise money to conduct a literature review on steroids, on the causes of anxiety and depression, a condition that affects well over 50 million people in the United States and hundreds of millions worldwide. Our goal is to create a codex, a guide that reveals all possible treatments for anxiety and depression for people that live with the condition, or for loved ones that have it, as my wife and my son do. To find out more about our fundraiser, visit findinggeniusfoundation.org and click on current initiatives. And now, to our guest.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius podcast, now part of the Finding Genius Foundation. I have one of my board members, a wonderful lady named Dr. Sandy Bevacqua. Bevacqua actually means drink water, I believe what she told me. I sometimes call her Dr. Baklava, because it sounds more delicious. But the topic we're going to talk about is pretty serious. It's depression and anxiety from a biochemical standpoint. And Dr. Sandy has a PhD in molecular and cellular biology, and she's really into biochemistry and blood testing and things like that. So I wanted to have her on. So Dr. Sandy, thanks for coming back.
Thank you for having me back.
Well, tell me, ballpark, how many patients over the years that have depression or anxiety or related symptoms have you worked with?
That is a great question. I'm going to say to you that there is some level of depression, anxiety, or both that's associated with so many different conditions. So, for instance, if someone comes with autoimmune disease, or maybe, it could be very serious, such as a cancer or an inflammatory condition, such as familial cardiovascular issues or diabetes, when we have an underlying or we have an overt diagnosis, sometimes there's going to be depression and anxiety there. But there are other people that come forward and their main issue is the depression and anxiety. They don't have another diagnosis. And is this because of, psychological events that have happened in their life? Is it biochemical? Oftentimes, with most clients, there's an underlying depression or anxiety that's there. So I'm going to say most of the clients, when I first meet them, have some level of depression or anxiety. A lot of people are suffering.
So could you call this a comorbidity with other chronic conditions, or just to come along, coincident condition?
Yes, sometimes it's going to be a comorbidity, and sometimes, but remember, if you have an issue going on, and sometimes there can be depression/anxiety that comes on as a result of an event, a shock to the body. And it could be physical shock. It can be psychological shock, like the loss of a loved one. And that can kick in a cyclical kind of depression, anxiety that the person just can't kick. And
not to say that, what about the chronic sufferers, the people that have had depression and anxiety for years or decades, and it comes and goes and comes and goes and has become a part of their life?
Well, in those cases, understand that where I'm coming from, I'm a PhD in molecular and cellular biology. I'm going to be looking first biochemically, along with a really very detailed medical history. I want to know, when did the depression, or was the depression always a part of your life? Or did it start on, sometimes people will say, it was right after that happened, when I got sick, or when that medication was given to me, or when we moved to so-and-so. When that event happened, it was right after that I had, that's when I recognized that it happened. So where I start is to look for the causes, look and see what's happening biochemically. So I'm going to be running blood chemistry or encouraging that person to see a healthcare provider or get it done on their own. We have third-party vendors now online where anybody can choose whatever blood chemistry they want. And we do the basics. We'll do a CBC with differential, a comprehensive metabolic profile, look and see how the liver and kidneys are doing, and balance of, oftentimes with someone with depression or anxiety, we'll see an imbalance of electrolytes because they're super stressed and it's reflecting back on their adrenal function. We may see that some of the B vitamins are amazingly deficient, or they have B vitamins that they can't process due to genetic issues. They may not be able to use the form of B vitamin that is in our food or in supplementation. I've had some of the more severe depression cases were due to supplements that people couldn't use. So they were in a toxicity.
What do you mean? Like they would take a supplement thinking it would help them, but their body couldn't use it. They would build up to toxic levels, or what was the mechanism?
Absolutely. In fact, the case I'm thinking of is a gentleman, and this is a great husband, great father, coach at the high school, was just a role model for lots and lots of kids. And all of a sudden, he dove into the deepest depression, wanted to die, and was banging his head against the wall like an autistic child, like way out of character. And for him, it turned out that his genetics kept him from processing, and a lot of people know about this, he couldn't handle synthetic folate. He had to have a very, very specific form of folate, and it actually took 2.5 years to get the buildup out of his system from, his wife, very well-meaning, was giving him a B complex that had a B vitamin in it that he couldn't process. And he had out of this world levels of folate in his bloodstream, and it causes extreme anxiety and depression. Yeah. So that took 2.5 years to get him back down to a ground level, and he's feeling better now. So is it, how concerning and how common is something like that? Should people that take supplements, has it become where, now even before you take supplements, you should talk to a doctor, or what should you do? Well, actually, that particular problem, depending on who you're looking at, it's somewhere between 26 and 29% of the American population have genes that will block them from processing, from activating and methylating their folate. And the form of folic acid or folinic acid, whatever form is correct for them, will be dictated by their genetics. So yeah, I am a big proponent of people having a genetic analysis done to see. And here's another one for you. What B12 is good for you? What form of B12? Is it, if you take a supplement, are you good with methylcobalamin? Maybe you are, maybe you're not. If you might need adenosine or a hydroxyl form of B12. What form of B12 is best for you is determined by your genetics. And this is really important too, because you can, a lot of people are walking around very B12 deficient, but when they go into the doctor to get tested, they're told that their level is too high. And the reason it's too high is because, even if you go to the store and buy crackers, there's going to be synthetic B vitamins in there that you might not be able to use in a form that you can't use. Oh, yeah.
Is there like a set of master biochemical pathways that everyone should have tested as early as possible, or what's the implication of this?
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar, and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click support us today. Now back to the show.
Honestly, anybody can go online, go get their genetics tested. I like 23andMe because they've been around for a while and they are testing more SNPs than most other companies. You might tell me I'm wrong, and there's another company that there's some that are claiming they're doing more than 23andMe, but I haven't seen the evidence quite yet. The data that I have coming in shows that that's not quite true yet, but at least there's competition amongst other companies, and you just send a saliva sample in through the mail and you get your genetics, and you can even tell them if you don't want them to keep your genetic data, tell them to dump it, and they do. If you want them to keep it, they do ask if they can keep your genetic data to make a database. But a lot of people have genes that are blocking their ability to process different B vitamins. And I'm going to tell you that I know for certain that if there are SNPs or genetic code that hasn't been discovered yet about the processing of other B vitamins like B5 and B6. You're not hearing about this, but I see the results of it because, in fact, everybody that comes to me with depression or anxiety, I test their B6 level. And in some people, it's skyrocket. It's very, very high. And the reason is because they can't process the B6 that's in the processed foods or in their supplements. And those SNPs haven't been discovered yet, so they won't be in your results, but we can tell from the blood chemistry. So you run blood chemistry and the genetics, and we can look and see what's going on with this person. What is it? Sometimes the genetics will say that a person has difficulty with producing the enzymes that we need to break down our neurotransmitters. So there are people that are very seriously depressed that cannot break down their dopamine or break down epinephrine or norepinephrine. They're having a really hard time. So they can have very high levels.
Quick question. What happens to someone that can't break down certain neurotransmitters? It takes an SSRI and they're re-inhibited from, it makes even more, I guess, temporarily. What happens to them people? Do they become manic or?
Okay, so a really common one is you make a lot of dopamine because you can't break down dopamine. It's a COMT, C-O-M-T genetic mutation that would cause that. And that's a transferase that breaks down dopamine. So if you can't break down your dopamine, every time you make it, you're producing more and more and more, and you have very high levels. Dopamine and serotonin should be pretty even, Stephen, as far as their levels in your body. And if you have even amounts, if the ratio is kind of a 1-to-1, then you're going to be probably pretty happy. And actually, one of the ways that there are symptoms of having high dopamine. One of them is being more interested in having orgasm. Now, those people there's a subset that have extremely low libido, so they don't have that interest in sex. But if you have somebody that's very sexually interested and but they're very depressed, that could be an indication of one of those people. But there's other symptoms as well. And you can go online and look at the symptoms of high dopamine. So let's say we take that person, put them on an SSRI. So now we're blocking their ability to break down serotonin. So now their serotonin starts building up. And so now you have a ton of serotonin and a ton of dopamine at the same time. Does that feel better? Yes, kind of. But there's going to be a lot of symptoms because that person now has crazy amounts of both of those neurotransmitters. And it does cause other problems, including backing up of certain liver pathways that are responsible for breaking those things down. So it's not the best solution, but they may actually be more functional than when they had a ton of dopamine and not enough serotonin. They might be suicidal at that point, but with the SSRI, it may balance them out to feel a little bit better, but it's not ideal. Ideal is you help them with the pathway to break down their dopamine so they get into the normal range with with all the happy people, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. With the depressed people, you've seen how many different reasons biochemically have you observed? Is there a small subset that tends to lead to depression, or is there just dozens of different ways that it can happen?
If you like this podcast, Please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
Well, actually, in an effort to answer that, I'm going to go back to the blood tests that need to be run, and that will get you there. So I'm not just looking at B vitamins. So I'll look at B12, folate, and B6 at the very least, because that pinpoints it. But B1, thiamine, or the benfotiamine, that is going to also be a reason. If somebody's very low in their B1, that can be a cause of depression as well. But that's going to be more anxious. When you take the B1, it's very calming. And so if somebody's really spinning out, like anxiety is a bigger piece, it could be B1 deficiency. And it's super cheap and easy to do, to take an activated form of B1 and see what it does. That's kind of something to look at. In fact, sometimes I will just do a shot in the dark approach and give some activated B1. We use some B8, which is called inositol. Inositol can be a real quick and easy, just a B vitamin approach, and see how they do, and possibly some activated folate if they don't have any symptoms of being a hypermethylator. And so if a methylated B is not going to harm them and they have none of those symptoms, then okay, we'll try some of these B vitamins. And if it's right for them, they'll notice right away. They'll feel better right away. However, it could be a lot more complicated than that. We already talked about neurotransmitters, but there are people that, for instance, genetically are producing extra ammonium. And if your ammonia is very high in your bloodstream, that can cause depression. But it's usually with fatigue. There's going to be fatigue, depression, but it can cause an anxiety because the body's being attacked with ammonia toxicity. And then we could have mineral imbalances, such as high copper, low zinc. I run into this a lot, and that can be associated with depression. Incredibly low magnesium is very common amongst people in their 40s and older, or in athletes. And that can be a cause of some depression, but it usually comes with muscle spasm.
How many this is a pretty big question, but how many do you think of the prescribed drugs out there lead to psychological consequences? Like they amp up your anxiety or depression, or they affect your mental state in a negative way? Because that doesn't ever seem to be talked about.
If you go onto any of the websites like drugs.com or drugsrx.org, I think it is. Anyway, look at any of the sites and look up the side effects of any of those drugs for depression. You're going to find that the symptoms that they treat are oftentimes listed as side effects of the drug. Antidepressants always have depression and anxiety as a potential side effect. So here's another one that I wanted to make sure I mentioned today. I know that you have had incredible speakers that have spoken to you about the desperate need for vitamin D in our country, in our world. Vitamin D is being burned up like crazy. And I'm going to tell you that one of the reasons why we're burning up so much vitamin D, you can go out nude in the sun all summer long and still have a vitamin D deficiency because we're living in a chemical soup. And the detox pathways are burning up the vitamin D. And one of the first symptoms of low vitamin D is depression and anxiety. Vitamin D is a hormone precursor. And low hormones or imbalanced hormones is a really big cause of depression and anxiety. So finding out if someone has the symptoms of one of their hormones being out of whack or several is really important. And there are lots of natural ways to balance that. But one of the first things that you do is make sure somebody has proper amounts of vitamin D in their system. And sometimes that's it can be a overnight cure. If they're really low, you can do high dosing of vitamin D for a couple of days. And if the person says, oh my goodness, I slept so well last night and I feel like a new person this morning. But
how do you know that? I mean, are there some people that have a pathway, or are they unable to? I guess, like you said, some people can be naked in the sun and not have enough. So what's happening biochemically in those people where they can't process it or use it?
Well, some people have mutations in their VDR or their vitamin D receptor genes, and that's keeping them from being able to make or use the vitamin D. But you can still help them by raising their vitamin D with supplementation. And vitamin D supplementation is dirt cheap. In fact, in India, they're giving people little packets of vitamin D, vitamin C, and zinc just to give them a chance to fight COVID. But that vitamin D has a beautiful positive effect on mood because you're giving it's a hormone precursor. So you're helping them balance their hormones and they feel better. But I've seen like men with low testosterone, women with low estrogen, men and women with low progesterone or low testosterone are, or the precursors like pregnenolone or DHEA, if they're deficient anywhere in this area, or okay, all hormones come from cholesterol. If somebody's taking a cholesterol medication, this statin drug to lower their cholesterol, they're probably going to get depressed, and it's going to be a hormone problem. They don't have the building material to make their hormones anymore. So if someone's on a statin drug, that's kind of a no-brainer. And if they have some of the cardiologists are saying, yeah, get that cholesterol as low as it can go. And that's not a good idea. All of a sudden, this person has, they're having all kinds of hormone symptoms. They're irritable, mood swings, depression, anxiety. They are, maybe depending on which hormone goes out, they're either having insomnia, they can't sleep anymore, or their hair is falling out, or they're getting completely cold in their body. Outrageous fatigue can be a part of that. Inability to focus, so mental function can drop. You can get with certain hormones. So let's say you're already pushing in the direction of insulin resistance. Might all of a sudden that statin drug or low cholesterol can push you into having major gut issues. So the person's gassy and they can't handle carbs anymore, and they start reacting to different foods. All of that, yes.
So what are is there a fixed set of tests that you use that, would help people figure out all the major, pathways that tend to be disrupted so that they can have supplements, as they need, or at least resolve their problem?
Yes. And you know what? Actually, I would be very happy to do this. If anybody wants to have that list, all they need to do is contact the office and I will just send that to them. I will send them the list of if you have depression and anxiety, please run these tests. I've already mentioned some of them, but I'll rattle them off. I'll slow down just a bit. Sure. The CBC with differential is appropriate. Comprehensive metabolic profile, not a basic or a general chemistry, but a comprehensive metabolic panel. You want to see if there's insulin resistance or any blood sugar instability. And that's going to be done not just with hemoglobin A1C, which is the standard test, but you also want to look at fasting insulin, because some people will have a normal hemoglobin A1C, but their fasting insulin will be way off. And then we want to look at the B vitamins, B6, B12, and folate are at least those, and maybe B1 and B2 as well. And then we want to look at homocysteine. So if you're not able to process the B vitamins, the homocysteine will go up. And that does put you at risk for cardiovascular disease, but it will also, in some people, increase agitation, and that anxiety will come up. Levels of ammonia to see if that's kind of more rare, but it is an option, and it's something that we do find. Those minerals I talked about, magnesium, zinc, copper, and then vitamin D levels. Oh my goodness, for everybody. That's really important. You can have fatigue and anxiety show up with low iron. So running an iron panel, that's appropriate, with ferritin. And the ferritin in this case may be an inflammatory marker, because that's another reason for anxiety in the body. If your body's getting attacked from the inside and you have inflammation inside of your body, you're gonna have anxiety. It's like you're getting attacked from the inside day and night. And so the ferritin in these people might go high. And there's other inflammatory markers that can be looked at, such as HSCRP, or high sensitivity C-reactive protein, fibrinogen, And I like it. It's optional, but I really love to see a cytokine panel. So we're looking at what kind of inflammation. If there's inflammation in this person's body, what kind is it? Is it the kind that leads to cancer? Is it the kind that leads to diabetes? Let's see what kind there is. And so a cytokine panel with like interleukin 1, interleukin 6. I like to look at interleukin 8, that's more associated with cancer. I like tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF alpha, and IGF-1. These are the cytokines that I kind of like to see in a person. Optional. Sometimes the doctor looks at you sideways if you ask for these. But also, if there is an immune issue, and oftentimes with depression and anxiety, there's a reason for that. And it could be in the immune system. So I just want to look and see, do we have any indicators for autoimmune disease? So a real simple test, run the SED rate, SED rate, or an ANA, anti-nuclear antigen. Sometimes I'll run an ANA screen, which is a number of, that we're looking for antibodies that are attacking different tissues. Let's see if you're under attack. And is that the reason why you're depressed? The hormones, I like to see at least the basic hormones. And this is for men and for women. Estrone, estradiol, progesterone. And on the testosterone, we like to look at total and percent free testosterone. And I love to see at least one, like if the person can go first thing in the morning for a morning cortisol, it's helpful because we can take a look at how the adrenals are doing. Oftentimes when someone's depressed and has anxiety, their cortisol can be crazy high off the charts, or it can be down in the dumps. They can be, if they have fatigue along with their symptoms, it could be that they're not even producing cortisol anymore. And that's a very, very different kind of depression. It can be very severe. The adrenals. It can also be thyroid. And so at least a basic look at your thyroid stimulating hormone, your free, like you don't have to pay for it, free T3 and free T4. This is a very quick look to see, is this person suffering from depression and anxiety due to the fact that their thyroid can't produce thyroid hormones anymore? That will cause a lot of different symptoms. It'll affect some, depending on the person. The skin can get dry, the person can get cold hands and feet, but they probably can't sleep well at night. They will have depression. They'll have irritability, mood swings, anxiety that can come and go and really knock them to their knees. It can be very severe. And here's another very rare one, super easy to test for, but it is still rare, and so it's an optional, is to do a single test on the parathyroid hormone. It's PTH. And the parathyroids can cause really deep, constant depression with anxiety. And that's one of the easiest ones to fix. And it's so cheap and easy to test for. And I do run into this one. And this one's so cool because you can turn it around in one visit. The person feels 1,000 times better almost instantly. And in cases where you just can't find what the cause is, sometimes the cause is really due to a viral infection or maybe Lyme disease. And it can really go in under the wire. They may not have the common symptoms. Their only symptoms might be depression and anxiety. But it's kind of like something that you test later. If all the rest of it didn't come, there was nothing that showed up, and there's nobody can figure this one out. Looking for Lyme disease is not a bad idea, and looking for like Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, looking to see if the immune system is functioning properly.
Once someone gets the suite of tests, are they now in a good position going forward to consider or not consider certain supplements or certain medications? Like, do they now have a map, or is it not that sensible yet on what they should or shouldn't take in terms of, again, medications and supplementation?
Honestly, when the blood chemistry is done, I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, there is a red flag, a big red flag that comes up and you go, oh, there's the issue right there. So now you can identify one place that it's like you're taking care of that red flag, whatever it is. Vitamin D deficiency, super easy. In some cases, it's not just one red flag. There's 2 or 3. There's a few things that need to be taken care of, and they can be taken care of one at a time, or knock them all dead. It's like go after them. And if there's, like, for instance, I mentioned, if the person goes on for a period of time and they have an immune system component, then maybe their gut is thrown off, or they picked up a pathogen, somebody, they have an unwanted guest in their gut, and that actually can throw off the neurotransmitters and be the cause of their depression and anxiety. So sometimes it's like, okay, all of this blood work is pointing towards the gut. Maybe we want to see if you have an unwanted guest. So maybe a stool sample is done, but that's more rare. And in some cases, it's an inflammatory issue, and that can be genetic. There can be a genetic component. And so maybe what we're going to look at is lifestyle or diet or both, or supplementation to help that person no longer have to deal with a high level of inflammation in their body. And in some of those cases, you knock out the inflammation and then the real cause shows up. Oh,
really?
Yeah, it comes to light because you've knocked out the inflammation that's masking the issue. If the whole body is being inflamed and that person's being attacked from the inside out, sometimes you want to attend to the inflammation. And then, let's say we're talking about somebody who does have insulin resistance. They're really reactive to simple carbohydrate foods. And you take care of the inflammation and stabilize blood sugar, and then all of a sudden something else shows up. There's a pathogen in the gut. There's a hormone imbalance. There's a B vitamin deficiency. Like the thing that is actually causing it will come to light, and it could have been masked because of the high inflammation. Because inflammation is like throwing a wrench into the works. It stops a lot of pathways from working properly and can be the cause of a highly inflamed person. So that person could be suffering from tremendous failure of different organs and the ability to digest and the ability to think properly due to the fact that they have high inflammation. Sometimes you have to take that one away and see what's the next layer. Like it's, the layers of the onion, a lot of practitioners talk about. That is relatively common. I'm going to say 1/3 of the people that I work with have an amazing unveiling that happens as a result of taking inflammation away.
Yeah, I didn't realize depression could be, a side effect of so many different things, and some of the things you think you're doing a good job for yourself on too.
And there's something else. I didn't mention this, but I'm going to bring it up. And you already know about this. I know enough about you that you know this. And that is, we are now forced to live on a planet that is very toxic. There's toxins out there, and some of those toxins cause inflammation in the body and give an unfair advantage to bad bugs growing in the gut. Some of those will cause depression and anxiety. So another cause potentially can be a toxicity issue, and it could be an underlying issue. And usually if you run blood work, and let's say we have that inflamed person like I was talking about, I have had a few people where we've been able to go, this looks like pesticide overexposure, or that person doesn't have the ability to process pesticides in their body, or they can't process phthalates from plastics or petroleum distillates or some type of chemical. They're having a hard time getting rid of it. They might not be strong in their genetics to be able to run that liver pathway or whatever. So they have a buildup in their body for whatever reason, either overexposure or they can't get rid of it. And then they have all this downstream effect. And one of the ways, let's go back to pesticides. If you have a buildup of pesticide in your body, what does the body do with it? What it will do is it'll increase your appetite. And the person will put on weight, and that's the body trying to save itself because the body will put on adipose tissue in order to store that chemical in it. And that's how the body makes the chemical go from loving to be in water, called hydrophilic, to wanting to be in fat, lipophilic. And that's how the body protects itself from that chemical. It stuffs it into the closet by having you gain weight, and now it's got some place to put it where it's not circulating in your bloodstream. So if that is one of those people, they will report that if they try to lose weight, they feel really sick. They will have symptoms or headaches. If they try to work out, they're like a weekend warrior, and by Sunday afternoon, they can't move. They're on the sofa and they can't move.
So the body is fighting them, trying to protect itself as it had before.
Yes. It's going to shut them down. They'll have fatigue, headache, even rashes on the skin. This is too much chemical that has gone from the fat into the bloodstream, and the body can't get rid of it, so it stuffs it back. So that person's going to be on the sofa with a big appetite. And that is another reason why people can get seriously depressed and the anxiety can get out of control. So there's that. And, and ever so rarely in the case of somebody who has adrenal dysfunction, where they're really high anxiety, or intense fatigue along with the depression, we might be getting into thyroid issues. A subset of that population may have pituitary or hypothalamus low function, and they may need something. I just had a lady that I was working with last week that she had pituitary and hypothalamus, we would say hypofunction. And as soon as we were able to address that, all of a sudden she's happier. So, but the hypothalamus especially is all about your personality. And if your hypothalamus is not functioning properly, it can really cause a lot of personality glitches. And that person is going to say, I don't even recognize myself. I don't even know who I am now. This is not who I am. And that's a classic hypothalamus or pituitary issue. And then you have people that will go into, get depressed with puberty or menopause, andropause, when the hormones are making a big change, especially if that person is highly stressed while they're going through puberty or highly stressed while they're going through andropause or menopause. Sometimes we'll see a huge crash into depression and anxiety because of the imbalance of the hormones that they're going through. And sometimes they just need a little bit of support to get through that transition to not fall into depression and anxiety for the rest of their life.
Wow. Okay. So Dr. Sandy, what's the best way for people to get help if they, you're probably overloaded already, but, can you help people across the U.S. or only in certain places? And where can people go to start gaining an understanding of what's going on with them? Because I would think a lot of them would, again, be mystified, and maybe they've gone years or decades with problems. And now all of a sudden you're saying, well, it could be this, it could be that. Like, how do they take that first step to help themselves?
Okay. Well, to answer one of your earlier questions, I take care of people all around the world. Doy conferencias en español también. I can work with people in Spanish and in English. I am able to help those with who are Chinese or Japanese speaking. I can get by in German. So I can take care of a lot of different people, and I can find people to translate if you can't find it. But most places in the world, people can find a family member that speak English too. So we do it that way. I work with people by phone or by Zoom, or still some people around the world use Skype. I have set aside some time for your listeners. I'm going to gift at least 10 free 15-minute slots. So if people want to call the office and take one of those slots, sometimes I can, if with a real quick kind of an interview process, I can point people in the right direction. And if you don't need my help, I'm perfectly fine with that. If I can point you in the right direction and get you going, then great. And that will, but I do recommend getting the blood chemistries done. If people contact this office, I'm happy to send that list that I rattled off. And just a quick email, email the office, and you can find me through drsandybevacqua.com. That's DRSANDY, B as in boy, E, V as in Victor, ACQUA.com. So there's my website. You can email me through that. And I'm just happy to help people get out of this tornado of depression and anxiety. It's a heck of a way to live your life if you can't have happiness and satisfaction in your life. And I'm a big believer in making the best of every minute.
Well, Sandy, that's very generous of you. So how can people get in contact? That's my last question for you.
Well, through the website, or if you want, you can just call the office. The office phone is 520-743-0575, and any of my staff will help you. If you get the message machines, because we're helping others, so just go ahead and leave a message, and we will get back to you. So no worries. I'm here for you, and I am happy to help you get out of this. I don't know, what do we call depression and anxiety? It's hell for people that have to live there. And my heart goes out to you. I don't want you to suffer anymore.
Well, very good. Dr. Sandy, thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate it.
I'm really, really happy to reach out to your population and help out in any way I can. Thank you so much.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.